Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, June 24th, 2020, and today we're going to be taking a look at the swing the election from the 2016 presidential election on 538. Essentially, we're going to be applying the most recent poll from the New York Times Siena College poll that was just released that shows Joe Biden with a 14-point lead over Donald Trump nationwide. Now, I understand that may be a very large estimation, but I do think that if we do apply the demographic shifts in a number of these areas, you will start to see how the electorate does shape up to be. So this is starting off with the 2012 numbers based off the 2012 demographic results, which show the Republican nominee at the time, Mitt Romney, but now Donald Trump, winning 60% of non-educated white voters and 54% of college-educated white voters, compared to at the time, Barack Obama carrying 93% of black voters, 71% of Hispanic voters, and 69% of Asian/others. So essentially, we're going to be taking a lot of the polls do actually have demographic data on their website themselves. They do offer us with a little bit more insight about their methodology and their polling. I mean, they have countless questions on here, but the only one we're really going to be focused on is question number 2. If the 2020 presidential election was held today, who would you vote for if the candidates were Donald Trump, Joe Biden, another candidate, wouldn't vote, don't know/no opinion? So while there were a pretty significant portion of the electorate, 9% in total, that don't know or have no opinion, I applied the 2016 demographics to the overall results. So if there were, 13% of undecided black voters, I applied it 91% of those undecided to Joe Biden and 6% to Donald Trump, just based off the 2016 numbers, which actually would benefit Trump a little bit more just because of the fact he did win that election despite being underwater in a number of key areas. So let's go ahead and apply that. Essentially, we're going to be again using the New York Times Siena College poll that shows Joe Biden at 50%, Donald Trump at 36%. When they say others, that does not mean a third-party candidate. That means that there are people who have no opinion or will be voting for a third-party candidate. As you saw, 9% of those were other candidates, whereas, did not know who they were voting for. Whereas I believe only, 3% were for another candidate and 2% just wouldn't vote in total. So when we apply the numbers here, you will start to see a number of states in real time flip over to the Joe Biden column, just because of the fact that he is doing very well amongst every single demographic group except for white non-college educated voters. So let's start with the black community, which pretty much has a very around 10% of the electorate, but 13% of the United States population. We definitely can see an increased turnout. I think that they should release a model for this sometime later on throughout the 2020 election season, but this is based off of the 2012 numbers, and I think it also is fitting considering that Joe Biden was on the ballot in 2012. He ran with President Obama, so they are starting to see I guess Biden is mimicking Obama's campaign in a sense, or at least trying to. So we'll start off with the black voters, which currently give the Democratic Party 93% of support. Back in 2016, it was only 90%, but Joe Biden seems to have a narrow increase at 91%. Now, I understand that based off the data that we see, it only shows Joe Biden with a 74% lead. You will see, again, I had to add on those voters who said they don't know or have no opinion based off the 2016 result. Those undecideds that will likely break in the same way the national vote was back in 4 years ago. So that's where I'm getting these numbers from. So 91% for the Democrats, 6% for Donald Trump. So actually, in this, they said 3% of voters would vote third party. This doesn't actually change much about each individual state, just the national popular vote. So that is pretty much done in terms of the first characterization in the demographics. Now we have the Hispanic voters, which 70% of them voted for President Obama compared to, I guess, the remainder. The turnout levels, by the way, I am not adjusting just because of the fact that it will likely change in 2020, but I don't have the exact numbers, obviously, since the election hasn't occurred. So I'm not going to estimate the turnout levels yet until we get closer to the election, until all of the primaries are done, until we have any concrete data in every single state. So 70% for the Democratic Party. This actually decreases to 67%. You can see some of the states, the grips are tightening, actually not tightening, loosening in some of the West Coast states, but overall still going to Vice President Biden. Now, this is where there's an actual very large shift in terms of Asian/other voters. The overall Trump campaign would be getting 37% of support. When Mitt Romney ran here, he only got around 32% of support, but Barack Obama got 68% of the share. Joe Biden is expected to get 55% based off the numbers that we have. So let's go ahead and just decrease this. As you can see, No states fundamentally change, but a lot of states do narrow up. If you see Virginia is barely in the Democratic column at this point, you see states across the Rust Belt, again, not too solid after a lot of these characterizations, but we will start to see it shift a lot more in favor of Joe Biden as we fill in the white actually, let's just start with the white non-college educated voters. So Joe Biden actually gets 40% of the voters here, but 59%, that's the exact number that we're seeing right now. A 19-point lead for for President Trump over Vice President Biden in terms of white non-college educated voters, which is actually a pretty significant portion of the electorate. 55% of them vote, which gives Donald Trump a pretty commanding lead over them. So surprisingly, we don't actually have to change anything there, but this is where everything's going to change. This is where Joe Biden drastically outperforms Hillary Clinton's numbers and actually drastically outperforms Donald Trump voters, but Donald Trump support, but also Barack Obama support amongst college-educated voters. If you look at the numbers here, 53% of them supposedly vote for the Republican Party. Back in 2016, Hillary Clinton overwhelmingly won college-educated white voters, but it wasn't enough to win the election. So when we look at the difference now, Joe Biden has around 7% increase compared to Hillary Clinton's numbers from 2016. So we actually have to adjust this in favor of Joe Biden, giving him a total of, you'll actually see this is actually pretty significant. Let's actually just go ahead and take a look at the data itself. So it shows Joe Biden ahead with a 28-point lead over these white working class voters. Again, we will have to cross out a number of the don't know or undecided voters at this point and apply it to the 2016 demographics. If you take a look at, let's go ahead and see, among whites college grad, it's 55% to 38%. It was only 30% of the electorate, but again, the college grad white vote overwhelmingly went to Hillary Clinton. But let's go ahead and just move back over into the thing over here. Essentially, we'd be working with a demographic that typically votes for the Republican Party. I mean, in the suburban area and a number of other parts of the country, this is actually a Republican, not necessarily stronghold, but a reliably Republican base. They only typically vote for the Democrats in off years. But Donald Trump does push away a number of white college-educated voters. Whatever it might be, he just doesn't necessarily bring a lot to the table for their support nationwide. Again, that does have a lot to do with the fact of his campaign style. Whatever it might be, he's just not going to be able to perform the same way that Mitt Romney did or John McCain did, but he does increase amongst white non-college educated voters. It also turned out decreased in 2016. You have to keep that in mind. Despite Hillary Clinton dominating amongst minority groups, they only made up, 20% of the electorate, 26% if you just count white voters on their own, which isn't a lot. If they're breaking overwhelmingly for Donald Trump amongst a large portion of the electorate, obviously he's going to have a much better chance at winning the election. That's just essentially how it works. So if we do apply these numbers, Joe Biden would be getting 64% of the white college-educated voters, which is enough to flip a number of states. And I know it seems surprising seeing some of these states over. It doesn't seem like this is going to happen whatsoever. But again, this is a poll that shows Joe Biden ahead by 14% nationwide. And we're not going to be adjusting turnout because this is based off 2012 numbers and they don't have a 2016 updated model. But it does show a number of states in favor of Joe Biden that we don't see normally in favor of him. So obviously this is more so of a Democratic pipe dream. If you take a look at the numbers here, they actually might be close to reflecting it, but I'm pretty sure that they're overestimating the total number of the electorate that the college-educated white voters are. Obviously, this is based off the 2012 demographics. Things definitely have changed, but this is an overwhelming victory for Joe Biden. I mean, this would be 449 electoral votes, a 56% popular vote share, and it actually mimics close to what we saw in the national poll, a 15-point lead. If you round up Donald Trump's numbers and round down Joe Biden's numbers, that's a 15-point lead nationwide, which actually isn't too far off from what we see in terms of a 14-point lead nationwide. So this actually is mildly accurate in terms of its overall popular vote. If this was actually the result, again, that's pretty much how polling goes, but when you take a look at that, if this is the actual result on election day, we could see Joe Biden with a very astonishing electoral college lead. Now, I don't think he's going to get 449 electoral votes by any means, and I don't think Donald Trump will not even crack 100 electoral votes. That's probably not going to happen. South Carolina, Missouri, Indiana, Mississippi, and Texas probably aren't going to flip in this election, but the rest of these states are 100% in play. And if Joe Biden, again, does have the 10-point lead that he has nationwide. He has officially hit 10 points nationwide. Donald Trump is actually at his lowest point in terms of nationwide polling data since the general election, actually since any Trump versus Biden polling began. This could all end up being very bad news for President Trump. So while he can recover at this point in time, Joe Biden has a very solid grasp on the presidency based off the most recent New York Times Siena College poll that was released that shows Joe Biden with a 14-point lead nationwide. Again, not likely to happen, but if it does happen, this could likely be the electoral map. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. A lot of these videos are based off of your own suggestions. I will be doing another demographic type video sometime soon, maybe not tonight, but later on in the week. Go ahead and check out the next video on your screen and a playlist at the bottom. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already. Please consider joining as a member on my channel. Check out the social medias, and I will see you all later today.